Novels, comic books, a video game, a soundtrack, trading cards, role-playing games, posters, model kits, micro machines, statuettes, vinyl dolls, vehicles, action figures. Let's get nostalgic. Shadows of the Empire was a multimedia project created by Lucasfilm in 1996. The story took place between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It was intended to boost interest in the Star Wars franchise ahead of the 1997 theatrical release of the special editions and the prequel trilogy. Shadows of the Empire was promoted like there was a movie coming out, but no film was ever planned. A movie without a movie, a giant marketing campaign utilizing all of Lucasfilm's licensing deals that attempted to reinvigorate the franchise in advance of even more new Star Wars on the horizon. One narrative told across various mediums. Oh, the 90s. I loved you so. Let's explore this massive commercial release, this enormous world-building venture. Let's dive into the history of Shadows of the Empire. This video is brought to you by FanHome. FanHome has created a subscription service that brings informative Star Wars encyclopedias or fun build-up models to your door every month. Get lost in all the details of your favorite saga. What are the different kinds of droids? You want to see the schematics of the Millennium Falcon? Learn about characters or weapons or technology and much more? Every volume in this incredible encyclopedia collection is jam-packed with information every Star Wars fan wants to know. There are 91 total books in this complete Star Wars encyclopedia collection. This thing is enormous and expansive. Every month you'll receive 4 volumes of the encyclopedia, 4 volumes per month. And while you're subscribed, you'll occasionally receive subscriber gifts like posters, coffee mugs, things like that, random gifts with your normal encyclopedia subscription. These volumes cover the entire chronology of the Star Wars saga, from the prequels to the Rise of Skywalker and beyond, with new characters and adventures from the latest TV series, including the last season of The Clone Wars and The Mandalorian, blueprints, schematics, thousands of photographs, jam-packed with information. Take a look at this volume about the Millennium Falcon that I have. It's 72 pages of details, most of which I never knew. Information about the hull structure, the gyro computers, life support systems. It goes into the specific modifications that Lando made. The detail in this volume is impressive, most impressive. And every volume is filled to the brim with that level of detail. If you're a fan of hyper detail in Star Wars, and let's face it, most Star Wars fans are, then subscribing to the FanHome Star Wars Encyclopedia will be right up your alley. You can cancel anytime, you get special gifts. These volumes are officially licensed, and there are 91, yes, again, 91 total volumes of encyclopedias in the full collection that would look so wild and huge on a bookshelf. If you're looking to get something for a fellow Star Wars fan, or even yourself, a FanHome subscription is the gift that keeps on giving all year round. 4 volumes every month, special gifts. Man, it'll be January of 2024, and you, or whoever you get this for, will still be receiving these encyclopedias a year later. Check out the link in the video description below for more information and how to get started with your FanHome subscription. Shadows of the Empire was dreamt up by Howard Rothman and Lucy Wilson in 1994. Originally, Lucasfilm producers wanted the project to focus on the main original trilogy characters and be set between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. But John Knowles, who has a rich history with his involvement in early Star Wars video games, suggested that it take place between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, because at the time, Not as many stories had taken place in that time period relative to the time period between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. It was a lesser mind era. The backbone of the Shadows of the Empire multimedia project was the novel written by Steve Perry. Familiar characters would go on an exciting and slightly darker themed new adventure. Shadows of the Empire illuminates the shadowy outlines of a criminal conspiracy that exists in the background of the events in the movies, ruled by a character new to us. Prince Xizor is a mastermind of evil who dares to oppose one of the best-known fictional villains of all time, Darth Vader. The story involves all the featured Star Wars movie characters, plus Emperor Palpatine, and of course, Lord Vader himself. A straight through line of canon was never really established through the 70s and 80s. Comics, books, they would take a lot of wild swings, borrow things from various media, change things, often clashing with one another, often contradicting one another. But in the 90s and early 2000s, Lucasfilm decided to focus on a more streamlined continuity. And in the year 2000, Leland Chi was appointed to create a continuity tracking database called the Holocron Continuity Database. The Holocron followed the canon policy that had been in effect for years, but the capabilities of the database software allowed each element of a story, the minutia, rather than the stories as a whole, to be classified. I've talked about this in previous videos, but it's fun to revisit the time machine from time to time. There was G canon, George Lucas canon, which was elements of canon that originated with Lucas, mainly from the films, of course. There was T canon, television canon. There was C canon, continuity canon, which consisted of all recent works released under the name of Star Wars, like books, comics, games, cartoons, and more. There was S canon, secondary canon, and secondary canon material was available to be used or ignored as needed by authors. There was D canon, which refers to Star Wars detours, and there was N canon, what if stories type stuff, or things cut from canon, deleted scenes, canceled projects, that kind of stuff. Leland Chi said, quote, he, Lucas, didn't really have that much concern for what we were doing in the books and games, so the expanded universe was very much separate. What we had to do in the expanded universe was, if George did something in the films that contradicted something we had done in the expanded universe, then we'd have to change the EU to match what he did in the films. Close quote. Shadows of the Empire was a massive, major shift of canon, introducing new elements, ignoring old elements, and telling a completely new and fresh tale in the Star Wars universe set between films we all knew and loved, giving context to the mini Bothans statement from Mon Mothma, telling us how Leia got the bounty hunter disguise she wears in Return of the Jedi, filling in some gaps, giving some context. The Thrawn trilogy and Shadows of the Empire were, to me at least, they felt like natural continuations. Felt like they were meant to fit with the film canon, if that makes sense. More so than any other books or comics that I had read before. Shadows of the Empire was the story between films. When I played the game or read the junior novelization that I got from a book fair in middle school, I felt like I was leaping into the world of Star Wars, as if I was participating in the natural evolution of the films. It was a resurgence before the resurgence. But the game is where the magic really happened for me. It wasn't just the fact that I was playing a new Star Wars game. It was the fact that I was playing a new Star Wars game on a new system. On a new system utilizing new 3D technology. On a new promising console that was a sneak peek of how games would be in the future. I was flying around in the Battle of Hoth, taking down AT-ATs with cables. I was piloting a new ship called the Outrider and turning TIE fighters into fireballs of scrap metal in the vacuum of space. I was walking on cliffs, blasting stormtroopers. I was flying with a jetpack across vast canyons. I was 1v1ing AT-STs. I was fighting Boba Fett. It was insane. It may seem quaint these days, but the fact that I was able to do all of that in a Star Wars game was wild. It's funny to me. Back in the day, I would bricks when I had to 1v1 an AT-ST or fight IG-88 or battle Boba Fett. Oh my god, how am I gonna beat them? They're so tough. But now, at the age of 36, I just switch to Seekers, line up Dash, and fire like 10 rounds and knock them dead super fast. I guess after 27 years of playing the same game from start to finish every year multiple times, I've gotten this down to a science. Shadows of the Empire was originally planned to have 19 levels. And then in a Nintendo Power issue, it was reported to have 12 levels, but when the final game came out, there were only 10 levels. Motion capture work was actually done for Dash Rendar, but the recorded motion capture animations proved to be unusable, and the animations had to be redone manually using keyframes. Music development began with MIDI approximations of the original film scores by John Williams, but the team believed that MIDI sequenced synthesis did not appropriately capture the essence of the music, and switched to digital samples of the original music. With the 12 megabytes of storage offered on the Nintendo 64 cartridge, developers had enough room to sample 15 minutes of music on the cartridge. Dash Rendar is voiced by John Seigan? I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Lebo the droid was voiced by Tom Kane. Luke Skywalker is voiced by Bob Bergen. Prince Xizor is voiced by Nick Tate. Shadows of the Empire was also released on the PC, and because of the larger storage space offered by PCs, LucasArts added full motion video cinematic sequences and a number of additional speech clips to the Windows version. The Nintendo 64 version just used still images for cutscenes. When you beat the game on easy, there's a pre-credit scene that shows Leia and Luke mourning Dash Rendar's death. But if you beat the game on medium or a higher difficulty level, there's an additional scene of Dash and Lebo jumping to hyperspace and escaping the blast. In North America, Shadows of the Empire was released for the Nintendo 64 on December 3rd, 1996, 3 months after the Nintendo 64 console was released. And then the game was released in Japan on June 14th, 1997. The PC version was later released on September 17th, 1997. I often wonder if I had never played Shadows of the Empire in 1996 when I was 10 years old. What would I think of this game? The game holds such a deep and heavy, nostalgic weight on my heart. Yes, the controls can be super wonky. Yes, there are problems. Yes, the levels are sometimes long and empty. Yes, the camera angles can kinda suck. But this was 1996. This was new tech. This was a new frontier. The criticism that Shadows of the Empire faced could be lobbed at many other games of the time as well. And despite its flaws, I think the game hit a very sweet spot for kids of my generation. There was a mixture of the familiar, while at the same time introducing a new and exciting sprawling Star Wars story that you were able to participate in. And even if you couldn't play the game, you could carry around that book. You could carry around those comics. You could play with those toys. You could constantly be enveloped in Shadows of the Empire. The Battle of Hoth level at the beginning of the game remains one of the best levels in any Star Wars game ever, in this random internet man's humble opinion. Is that opinion based on nostalgia? Yeah! There was a 6-issue comic book series which focused on Boba Fett and the bounty hunters we see in The Empire Strikes Back. I owned a couple back in the day. I never owned all of them. I was never much of a comic book guy, so forgive me, I can't speak much on this or my feelings towards them. Kenner made toys for the Shadows of the Empire line. This line contained action figures like Dash Rendar and Xizor. It included vehicles like the Outrider and swoop bikes. It included classic characters like IG-88 and Boba Fett. Some classic characters were given a new look. Chewbacca was disguised as a Wookiee bounty hunter, and Luke Skywalker came in an Imperial uniform. Louis Galoob Toys, a company made famous for their line of micro machines, created multiple sets of miniatures for the Shadows of the Empire line. The company Applause released 2 vinyl figures, Dash Rendar and Prince Xizor. I like these figures. I like the Applause vinyl figure line. I actually have a Princess Leia Applause vinyl figure, and it's always sitting above my computer monitor. It's almost like a little mini, like a statue almost. So if you're like looking for something cool to display, I would recommend like checking out eBay for these Applause vinyl figures. They don't move, they don't articulate, they're just pretty cool, retro, vintage looking statuettes almost that look pretty neat on a shelf. and they go for pretty cheap. Topps released a Shadows of the Empire trading card line. The 100-piece Shadows of the Empire set represented all 3 platforms that tell the overall Shadows story, the book, comics, and the game. Greg and Tim Hildebrandt, the twin artists who painted this original Star Wars poster, actually did the artwork for the trading card set. Card number 47 depicts Leia preparing for Mr. Seductive himself, Prince Xizor. Okay. In the 1997 special edition of A New Hope, swoop bikes and ASP labor droids make an appearance, and we also briefly see Dash Rendar's ship, the Outrider, leaving Mos Eisley. While Shadows of the Empire as a whole is now considered legends, pieces of it have filtered into canon. Crime syndicates like the Black Sun was made canon in an episode of the Clone Wars. The Outrider appears in an episode of Star Wars Rebels. Dash Rendar is mentioned in the movie tie-in book Solo: A Star Wars Story, and the Galaxy's Edge cookbook features a recipe for Xizor salad. Shadows of the Empire hit me in all of the right spots back in the day. Gearing up for the theatrical release of the special editions, riding the wave of excitement for the Star Wars prequels. I was the perfect age. I was 10 years old when Shadows of the Empire came out in 1996. We knew new Star Wars movies were on the horizon. And from 1996 to 1999, that build-up, that anticipation was so damn enthusiastic. I was the perfect age to experience that wave. Shadows of the Empire was the storm before the storm, the appetizer before the meal. All that old nostalgia's a kick in the gut again. Hello, Greedo. Out.